Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My uncle left me a tropical paradise with some important rules to follow. Alright, anyone have something like this happen to them? So the other night, I get back to my apartment after another lousy shift, and there's a freaking letter addressed to me on my bed. Not in the stack of bills piled up under the mail slot, on my mattress. Looked like it came out of a fantasy story. Fancy wax seal on the envelope and everything. I asked the landlady if the security cameras covering my hallway recorded anyone breaking in, but it just caught that punk from 4F making out with his latest girlfriend. All my windows were still locked from the inside when I checked. Creeped me the hell out. I didn't open the letter for a few days. Figured if someone was playing a prank on me, they'd out themselves if I didn't bring it up for a while. But I got curious, and a few hours ago I popped the seal and read it. Here's what it said. Underscore. Dearest nephew, if you are reading this, it means my long life has finally drawn to a close and I must pass along the family estate to my most eligible next of kin, which is you. Being a single man in his youth with few social obligations, you are the prime candidate to undergo this venture. Just imagine it. Your own private island with a lavish mansion, breathtaking scenery, full amenities, even Wi-Fi, and never having to work another day in your life. And all you have to do to leave the dreary world of the 9, the 5-wage slave, is pack your bags. But I think I'm getting ahead of things. Allow me to introduce myself. You have never met me, but I am your father's great-great, Uncle Stanley, your grandmother Constance's cousin. Given my less than respectable lifestyle in my youth and my disappearance 60 years ago, it would be no surprise if the memory of me had been conveniently swept under the rug. I gather my life before undertaking this lifelong vacation bears similarity to yours. I kept to myself with little social interaction, had disinterest in work and studies, and had nothing to occupy my time but my vices. And much like yourself and those before me, I was in my early 20s when I got a letter from a forgotten relative with the deal of a lifetime. Since then, my entire life has been spent in luxury and peaceful isolation. I kept up to date with the outside world through newspapers, television, and the internet. Supplies arrive regularly at the dock, and I have never found myself wanting. I enjoyed many hobbies such as fishing, swimming, gardening, island chores, and even did a spot of writing. Now, as I feel my age catching up to me, I must pass along this paradise and prepare its new tenant, or should I say caretaker, for what awaits you should you choose to take up this offer. For while your life here will be luxurious, nothing is free, and there are a few simple responsibilities you must keep tabs on. That, and living in isolation means you must be aware of any and all hazards, so as not to find yourself caught with proverbial thumb up your keister. Don't worry, our family has been enjoying this island for generations, and through over 3 centuries of trial and error, we have this place figured out to a T. The mansion's library will have all you can want to know about this place's history and rules of upkeep, and I will write several more cheat sheets to help you with the more nuanced tasks. But for the sake of brevity, this letter will just get you up to speed on the process of getting you settled on your arrival, should you accept the responsibility. A car will pick you up at first light the day after you open and read this letter. You'll know it when you see it. Don't ask how it knows to come. Just be ready at the curb with your belongings. Don't leave anything behind you want to lose, as you won't be coming back. From there, you will be driven to port, where your driver will point out the ship waiting to take you to your new home. The crew will load your belongings. Under no circumstances are you to offer to help them, but do be sure to thank them for their services. They're persnickety about these things, and besides, you're about to begin a new life of leisure. No point in throwing all that away by becoming the newest member of the crew. Once on board, the trip will take 4 days. Do not worry if you have a tendency towards seasickness. The helmsman is sure, and the ride is smooth no matter the weather. However, while you are allowed full access to the ship during the day, IT is imperative that at night you stay on the top deck. Under no circumstances should you venture below deck at night regardless of threats of impending storms, as the crew is restless and the moonlight's protection won't reach below. Instead, spend your nights at the forward top deck near the ship's figurehead, and sleep during the day in the shade. Also, while the cook is a surly individual, he has a jovial nature at heart and his cooking is immaculate. But whatever you do, don't ask for seconds and politely decline the gumbo. Long pig may sound delicious, but believe me when I say it is one culinary venture you don't want to take. When you arrive at the island, the crew will unload your belongings into a golf cart with a storage trunk parked near the dock for your convenience. It is now safe to assist them if you so desire. Be sure to thank them again for their services and wish them well. Shake the captain's hand, but do not do so with the helmsman. Stay at the dock and watch until they sail out of sight. If you happen to see the ship capsize, check the mooring post on your right. If the time matches what was carved into the wood, then there is nothing to worry about. If it doesn't, note the time for later, then begin making your way along the path to the mansion up the hill. You should reach the house well before sundown. Try not to get distracted with the scenery. There'll be time enough for that later. The front door should be unlocked, but when you first arrive, pass it up and instead park the cart to the right of the mansion by the greenhouse. You can leave your belongings there. They will be moved to your quarters at night after you familiarize yourself with the house a bit. The door closest to the greenhouse opens into the kitchen. If the ship that brought you here went under at a time other than what was carved on the mooring post, write it down on the clipboard hanging next to the sink. Feel free to grab a light snack from the fridge if you're feeling peckish, but be sure to save room for dinner. Then walk through the green door, which opens into the dining hall. The tables will be set, and all but one of the chairs will be pushed in. Leave this chair out and the half-eaten food in front of it untouched. It is a custodian's seat, and you will return to his meal after he brings in your belongings later in the night. From the dining hall, you will walk into the main foyer. Take your time to appreciate the marble staircase, and see if you can make out the faint impressions left by feet from 3 centuries of our family treading up and down them. Make your way up to the 3rd floor, landing, and take a right. The opulent door at the end of the hall is the master bedroom, but do not enter, as the custodian sleeps there between tenants and values his privacy. Instead, politely knock 3 times, and announce that you are the new occupant and will be requiring him to return to his assigned quarters by the morning. Then, return downstairs to the dining hall, where your own dinner will be waiting for you at the main table. After dinner, be sure to stack your plates and utensils neatly. You want to make a good impression with the custodian. Then, return to the foyer and go through the large green double doors on the other side of the mansion. This is the library, where you will spend the night while the custodian readies your room and gets you settled in. The armchair by the fireplace is quite comfortable, and in my recent years, I find myself comfortably sleeping here more than the master bedroom. While there is an extensive collection of books, I guess that you'll be more interested in the small paper taped to the underside of the coffee table with the Wi-Fi password. However, I would advise you read the letter I will leave in the large green book on the writing desk. It will entail how to proceed with your first day as the island's caretaker, as getting a feel for these things ahead of time helps. By 9:45 p.m., close and lock all locks on the double doors, and check to ensure the window locks are in place and not loose. A small screwdriver is in the left drawer of the writing desk if they need to be tightened. Then, get comfortable and spend the rest of the night here. Ignore any noises coming from the hallway. The custodian will be using the front door throughout the night, so expect to hear it opening several times. If you need to use the bathroom, there is one on the other side of the blue door to the right of the fireplace. There is a small case with reusable earplugs on the mantelpiece. I would advise you use them this first night, as the local wildlife tends to get vocal after 10 p.m., and while most are harmless, their calls can be unsettling for those unaccustomed to them. On that same note, if you hear your name in the night, do not respond or react in any way. Just don't. Trust me, it's not worth it. and that should cover your first night on the island. You will be awoken in the morning with 3 knocks on the double doors. This is a custodian, letting you know he has finished transferring your belongings to the master bedroom. He will not enter the mansion again, except for the scheduled cleaning days. From there, refer to my aforementioned letter in the Green Book for everything you'll need to know about officially becoming caretaker of the island and all it entails. I do hope you'll take this chance of a lifetime, but the choice is of course yours. Regardless of your decision, I hope this letter found you well, and that you will continue to have a pleasant life. Sincerely, great Uncle Stanley. Underscore. I still had the login for the family tree service my grandmother got for us before her passing, and sure enough, I did have a great Uncle Stanley, although there was next to nothing about him other than his name. While it could be, and probably a scam, I gotta admit, it's not like I've got a lot to lose. My job sucks ass, and I've had to sell most of my belongings just to cover the rent in this glorified storage unit of an apartment. I haven't been close with most of my family in years, not since I was falsely accused of SA in high school, because the popular girl was bored. Same incident lost me to few friends I had, so my social circle is non-existent too. I only have a small backpack, but it can fit what few clothes and possessions I have easily enough. Honestly, I'm at the point where I'll try anything over this dead-end life I'm living now. I've got my stuff out on my mattress ready to be packed, and let my boss know I won't be in for a few days. I'm going to wait outside tomorrow for the car to pick me up. If you don't hear from me in a week, they probably took my kidneys or something. I'll post again when and if I can. Wish me luck. Story 2. Slumberjack Woods. The logging industry might not seem like an action-packed world of politics and schemes, but you'd be surprised. Where I used to work, there were about 4 different companies all trying to put each other out of business. There was also an adjacent area that bordered on a national park. So yeah, if you looked at it from above, it all looks like forest, but there are a lot of invisible lines to look for. I was part of a regulatory watchdog. All the companies in the area called on us as an independent third party to settle land disputes and accusations of overstepping regulatory boundaries. Basically, we were the checks and balances that made sure they all played nice. That this particular case landed on my desk was a matter of contention. The last 2 cases that had been dropped in my lap ended up being lengthy and unnecessary legal battles. So my supervisor had been putting off giving me field work for about 2 months. There was some pressure to vacate my seat entirely, and I wasn't eager to make a fool of myself for a 3rd time. So whatever this was, it had to go off without a hitch. I was given a couple of files. Satellite images, statements, interviews, and witness testimony. There was this space at the edge of company property that had been cut down and cleared out illegally. Insurance companies had demanded a complete third-party review before they agreed to a payout. There was also an issue with the nearby park services, as damage had been done to protected land, making the rangers suspect that this was either self-inflicted or the work of an organized third party. Now, making arrests or proceeding with a formal criminal investigation is the work of the police, but my job was to give them a neutral and objective perspective, something they could point to as evidence of suspicion of foul play. An acre or 2 might sound like a lot of land to cover, but when you're dealing with multiple sites of about 15 to 25 acres separately, it quickly falls under the radar. Given how close this land was to the edge of the property, I suspect they hadn't intended to clear it anytime soon, so they must have stumbled upon this by accident. I drove out early Monday morning. I had a meeting with one of the foremen working in the area to corroborate the statements I'd been given, and it all checked out. They hadn't been operating in the area. There were no witnesses who could say what had happened, and no one had investigated it close enough to cause any obstruction. We were good to go. I was put in contact with an assistant foreman named Michael, a very driven man in his early 30s, whose head seemed to have been fused with the mandatory white helmet they made us wear. He had this handlebar mustache that made me think of cartoonish uncle. I met him by a signal orange Jeep with the company logo printed in all black. "I'm just here to get you where you need to go," he explained. "I'm not here to intrude." "I'm sure that won't be a problem." I smiled. "You know where we're headed?" "Of course, yeah. It's been the talk of the crew for a week now." "How so?" I asked. "You hear things," he explained. "Like how no lumber was stolen." "What?" "Yeah," he reiterated. "No lumber's been stolen. Most of it just kind of lay there." That part had been conveniently left out of my prep work. Driving through untrained lands in a Jeep isn't as comfortable as it sounds. Sudden dips and rocks and fallen trees make for a bumpy ride, and if you're not used to it, it's going to cost you your lunch. I was prepared enough, but I noticed Michael looking over a couple of times. He probably wasn't used to outside passengers, having spent a lot of time in the wild. And to be fair, I didn't really look the part. "I'm not sure what exactly you do," Michael admitted. "Some sort of insurance thing?" "That's part of it, yeah. But I'm mostly here to make sure everyone plays along." "They do," he said. "I mean, it's all the same guys." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are only so many loggers in one area, you know? You quit one place, you go to another, so you all know each other, even at other logging companies." "Yeah," he said, clutching the wheel as we barreled through a bent sapling, leaves brushing against the windows. "I'm just saying, I don't know any guy who's motivated enough to bring a crew to cut this stuff, which means it's an outside thing, or something natural." I added, "Wildfire, soil degradation. It's not usually that black and white. No offense, but in my experience it is." Michael rolled onto a half-finished road. It lined the space between the government-owned park space and the edge of the logging area. It was only meant for industry use, but it was surreal to see. This one line of asphalt in the middle of the towering woods, stretching on for as far as the eye could see. If you were to accidentally get turned around, it'd be impossible to tell which way you were going. The forest opened into a clearing on both sides of the road. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The trees were either bent, broken, or cut down. There were definite signs of human intervention, with clean-cut stumps. Stepping out of the Jeep, something just felt wrong, like we'd entered some kind of dead zone. You could taste the exposed sugary sap in the air. Normally, this space would be ripe with wildlife, but I couldn't hear a thing. No birds, no buzzing, nothing. Michael took me a bit to the side and waved at a man by the tree line. The man was clearly a park ranger, somewhere in his late 60s. He was short and had a sort of lanky build, but with the sinewy look of someone too tough to quit. Michael introduced me, and the man shook my hand. "Ranger Wilson," he said. "Thought I'd give you a hand, given our circumstance. You got an idea what's happening here?" I asked. "Area's always been quirky," he explained. "Most of the damage has been done on the park side." "How much damage are we looking at?" Ranger Wilson scratched his chin with his scrawny fingers. "About 1.5 acre on the company side, about 2 on the park side. Most people never come out this way. We were informed by our gracious neighbors." Michael excused himself from the conversation, leaving me with a walkie-talkie to call in when I needed a ride back. With Michael out of the picture, Wilson relaxed his shoulders as he took lead. "Place used to be teeming with folks back in the 70s, he explained as we walked. "Called it Slumberjack Woods. Strange name. Well, they mostly went out here to get high and skinny dip in the river. There was this glade nearby that had an amazing view, perfect for hippy dippies and drum circles. You don't sound too happy about it. Just sad to see the good times pass us by." He gave me a knowing grin with a silent explanation. I could sense we might have been an equation of unruly 70s teenagers. The damage done to the area was significant, but not as clear-cut as first believed. There were some trees that had been cut down with a chainsaw, others with an axe. Not all of them, though. Some were brought down by wildlife. Ranger Wilson pointed out a couple of fallen trees with fresh marks from bears. There were also signs of beavers. "Ain't a lot of beavers this far west of the river," he explained. "For them to go out of their way like this, it's strange. You know what's happened to all the bushes and branches?" I asked, "What do you mean?" I bent down, adjusting my shoes. I pointed at one of the fallen trees, showing the damage done to the lower edges of the trunk. Branches had been broken off and removed. You can see this on a couple of trees, I said, and some of the saplings are missing entirely. I'll be damned. Good eye. According to satellite imagery, most of the damage had been done in a sort of oval shape, with the majority being on the park side. I showed it to Wilson and asked if we could check out the center. There had to be a specific point where whoever did this started, and maybe that could give us an idea of how long it had been going on. Traversing this kind of environment takes a toll, though. Fallen trees and branches and rocks. You gotta make sure you don't slip, or you'll dislocate an ankle quicker than a flash flood. Not to mention you might be dangling your toes into a viper's nest. Tough boots or not, you don't want to tempt fate more than necessary. So why Slumberjack Woods? I asked. I don't get the name. Well, when you had a bit to smoke, you usually doze off. It's not that complicated, son. That's all. Well, a couple of folks claimed it was the best sleep of their lives, he continued. Some would come here before a big test or a job interview just to relax for a bit. Used to camp out for a day or so, listening to music and sitting by the river. I guess some places just kind of stick with you. I guess they do. We ended up by the river, following it northwest. We were somewhere around the center, but with things looking so different from what Wilson was used to, it was difficult to find any meaningful landmarks. We ended up walking straight across the clearing, without seeing anything but fallen trees. Sometime after lunch, Wilson found a comfortable spot in the shade and had a sandwich. As he finished it, he leaned back and covered his face with his hat. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. "Don't stray too far." "I'll check the hill for a bit," I said. "Southwest." "All right," he sighed. 10 minutes, then I'll join you. ... And with that, he was out like a light. What a gift. I took a short walk. There was a hill not too far from the river, which gave me a great overview. It was strange seeing so much empty space in the middle of such a lively area of the woods. I didn't know what to make of this. It felt like an industrial-level operation, but the sign showed a variety of tools and causes. There was no immediate answer, and that was unusual for my line of work. I remember spotting a couple of chickadees among the fallen trees, picking branches and leaves for their nest, the first signs of life I'd seen out there. As they noticed me watching, they took off westward. There was something there, in the distance. I couldn't make out the details, but it was in a sort of dip between two hills. You couldn't see it from a low position, making it practically invisible unless you were at the right angle. Peculiar. I went to investigate. I could still see the hill where I'd been standing, so I could call for Wilson if necessary. But I made my way down, noticing a path. It was the first sign of movement or organized effort I'd seen. A clear path with drag marks. I rounded the edge of one of the hills and wiped some sweat off my forehead. Minnesota summers are no joke, and I had the sunscreen to prove it. I stopped dead in my tracks. The path kept dipping into a sort of crater. It was about 30 feet across and 20 or so feet deep. The entire thing was covered in fallen trees, branches, bushes, leaves, twigs, saplings, and roots. Pretty much whatever you could break off and carry, all pushed into a single massive pile. It was deceptively large. Even at this depth, the pile was tall enough to rival the surrounding hills. It would only take a couple more feet for it to be visible from all directions. I just kind of marveled at it. The effort it would take to bring this together was enormous. I looked up, only to see Wilson standing on top of the westward hill. He was holding a small hand axe and dragging along a couple of branches with little fanfare. He dropped it onto the gargantuan pile, causing a ripple of movement among the branches. A couple of chickadees took flight, and, looking a bit closer, I saw a falcon, a raptor nesting alongside prey animal. "Wilson." I called out, "What are you doing?" He looked down at me, clutching his hand axe. "What do you mean?" he asked. "What's with the branches? What's with this?" I gestured toward the pile. Wilson turned to it, scratching his head. "Jesus," he muttered. "What the hell happened here?" We took some pictures and investigated it. At first it just looked like a disorganized pile, but there was some sense to it. Most of the trees that had been dragged or lined the bottom and the edge. while most of the larger branches were on the inside. It was structurally sound. The outside was mostly covered in leaves and bird nests. I confirmed that, yes, I could see falcons alongside chickadees and cardinals. There were also signs of raccoons, and I spotted a couple of curious eyes peering out at me, possibly foxes. Ranger Wilson pointed out deer droppings nearby. All in all, this didn't make sense to me. Animals didn't congregate into piles, especially not a man-made one, which put a couple of things into consideration. One, that this wasn't a natural process. Two, that this wasn't man-made. All the while, I couldn't get a straight answer from Wilson about his contribution to pile. He shrugged it off and was noticeably quieter from that point forward. That was one of the most curious things about the pile, just how quiet it was. This was a massive collection of trees and bushes, teeming with life, but was silent as a grave. No chirps or songs, no buzzing insects. I could see ants and bees crawling next to one another, carrying an occasional leaf or pine needle. I could see mice scurrying around, carrying twigs with their teeth. I walked up to the pile to look a little closer. There were holes for larger mammals to crawl through, giving it the appearance of a nest or a mound rather than just a pile of debris. There were things living in there, no doubt. There were other stories about this place back in the day. Wilson called out from atop the hill. There was this bonfire. What about it? I asked as I peered into the nest. A lot of folks came by to build a bonfire. It was supposed to be this amazing thing to burn at the end of summer. A lot of folks came around to pile stuff on. It wouldn't happen to be this pile right here, would it? Not sure, he admitted. Area looks different now that it's all dead. But yeah, they never burned the thing. I guess they were happy enough just building it. I looked a little closer, seeing a couple of eyes reflect at me from the depth of the pile. Doesn't look all that dead to me. I muttered, doesn't look dead at all. Wilson explained as he escorted me back to the road. The bonfire had been this idea by some of the regulars. They would come back every now and then, have a smoke, and then go chopping up something to add to the pile. Hence the jack part in Slumberjack Woods. It was just something to clear your mind, he said. Like meditation, you know? So you're saying they've been clearing this area since the 70s? Hell no, he laughed. I'm saying that's what they did back then. People have moved on. Haven't seen anyone around these parts for years. So what are you suggesting? I asked, what's happened here? He scratched his head and looked back, shaking his head. I don't have a God's honest clue, truth be told. I called Michael and waved goodbye to Wilson for now. Wilson yawned and lumbered back into the woods, following an old trail. I didn't have to wait long for Michael to pick me up with his Jeep, asking me what I'd learned as we drove off. I told him about the pile. We'll get someone to clear that out, he said. Shouldn't be too much trouble. You got any idea what it is? I asked. Looks like a lot of work. I've checked with the guys who found it, he said. A guy who used to go up there to take a nap during lunch hour. He didn't have a very good explanation. What did he say? Not much, Michael sighed. He just sort of found it. Went up there for a nap, got a bit confused, and ended up in clearing. That happened a lot with your crew? I asked. They get confused much? Can't say they do. He pointed in the rear view mirror. The clearing could still be seen in the distance. But around that part of the woods, I guess they do. I spent most of that evening collecting my thoughts and findings. I summarized the various conclusions I could draw, but ended up with an empty line under conclusion. That was the one part one couldn't figure out. I sent what I had to my superior, knowing full and well that I'd get a stern talking to about not having an answer. Inconclusive reports had been my downfall for the Part 2 cases, and this wasn't looking to fare any better. The next day I wasn't just meeting up with Michael. I was meeting up with about 10 of his guys, all in various vehicles. And at the forefront of it all was an excavator, with that same signal orange color and the company logo. Michael was excited to get this done and over with. I got in his Jeep as the little convoy rolled out. They're probably not going to want to push this issue, he said. They don't really care about that lumber as long as no one else has been making a profit. Well, there's no sign of that, I said, but something's up, that's for sure. It was unreal seeing those machines roll into the clearing. bumping over fallen trees and dry stumps. A couple of people had gotten out of their jeeps to guide it through, waving and directing it with hand signals. Getting closer to the pile, I noticed a silhouette on the hill. I looked up to see Wilson, standing by a fallen tree, chucking branches onto the pile. I excused myself from Michael and got out. It took me a while to navigate the brambles, but I made it all the way atop the hill. As the crew rounded the corner and oohed and awed about the pile, Wilson was just standing there, casually throwing branches. His eyes were closed. I observed him closely. He moved slowly, but with the same confidence as always. He leaned down, broke off a branch from a tree, and threw it down the hill. I could see a couple chickadees rock back and forth as the branch landed next to their nest, but they didn't take flight. They didn't have a care in the world. I tapped Wilson on the shoulder and watched his eyes open. He groaned a little and looked down at his hands, covered in tree sap and scratches. "You all right?" I asked. "Must have nodded off," he said. "What day is it?" I wanted to tell him that's something he ought to know, but there was a tone to his voice that didn't lend itself to sarcasm. I shook off the thought and gave him a pat on the back. "You need me to call someone?" "You good?" "I'm good," he insisted. "I'm good." Then he saw the excavator. He looked up at me, then down at Michael and his crew. Then he was off like someone had fired a racing pistol. Wilson hurried down the hill to meet with Michael and his crew. They almost came to blows immediately. I thought the two of them knew each other pretty well, but that didn't seem to be the case. Michael argued that the pile was on company property, while Wilson argued that it could be the home to endangered species, and that we couldn't do anything to it before we had a clear idea of what it was. But while they argued, the excavator crept closer. There was a sort of electricity in the air, a spark. Something didn't feel right, and I could watch the hair on my arm stand at attention, like I dragged my feet across a rubber carpet. Michael grabbed his walkie-talkie and gave the operator the go-ahead. Wilson knocked the walkie out of his hands, and the two escalated from words to finger-pointing and getting in each other's face. Meanwhile, I listened to the walkie-talkie. "Coming up on the side now," the operator said. "Looks like a beaver dam from hell." I could hear the whine of the machine as it lifted the arm up high, ready to be brought down. "You hear that?" the operator said. "There's something. I dunno." I tried to call Michael over, but he was too busy berating Wilson, who in turn was busy berating him back. The crew was looking worried, and the operator was sounding more worried still. The excavator's arm hung still in the air. "There's something in here," he continued. "Not like in there, but dash." The operator flung his arm about, as if waving away an insect. Then he did it again, and then he moved around the cabin. "Shit, there's something on the floor. There's something on Dash." The other crew members hurried his way as Michael looked up, asking Wilson to shut up. Then a scream. One we didn't need a walkie-talkie to hear. We all rushed forward. I saw one guy trip over something, clutching his leg. Another waved off a couple of bees. Someone got to the excavator and pulled the door open, only for a handful of snakes to spill out. The operator was unconscious, his face stung red with bees, some of which still crawled over him. His rescuers dropped him, shocked by the hissing vipers in the cabin. Rattlesnakes, it sounded like. I stopped. The guy who tripped started screaming about a bite, and another physically had to kick off a rodent trying to crawl up his leg. I could see things moving the dirt, spiders and ants side by side, heading the way of the excavator like an insectoid parade. And for the first time since I got there, I could hear life. Bird song, screeching falcons. And looking up, I could see them, circling the nest together like a cohesive flock, like a perfect circling halo of wings and beaks. All of them just waiting for someone to step out of line, to get a little too close. I helped in whatever way I could, and Wilson did too. 3 guys had rattlesnake bites, and the excavator operator got at least 30 or so bee stings on top of that. We had to call for an airlift to a hospital. For the rest of the afternoon, that was all we do, cleaning up the aftermath of what had turned into a royal clusterfuck. Michael was stuck talking to his boss, and a couple of people came out to see the pile with their own eyes. They discussed how to best get rid of it, but it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. They were too afraid to even get close enough to move the excavator. By late afternoon, I ended up sitting next to Michael on a stump. The crew had cleared out, but I wanted a statement for my report. I got one, but after the bureaucratic minutiae passed, I was left with a man that was worried for the safety of his people. Never had a snake bite before, he said. The occasional bee sting, sure, but this is fucked. Logging is dangerous business. I agreed, but yeah, this is new. I'll be honest, he continued. We've had some trouble. Some guys wandering off their position. Someone twisting their ankle while on a walk to God knows where. Didn't say anything about that in my file. Cause it makes us liable, he explained. So we shut up about it. But that thing over there, that's the core of it. All of it. You had any sleepwalkers? I asked, like more than usual? Apparently. It wasn't as unusual as I would have been led to believe. Michael explained off the record that it had happened a couple times a week over the past few months. Some equipment would go missing too. Mostly hand axes, meant to clear out branches, so you can reach with your chainsaw. Some folks have been found wandering the outskirts of the clearing. It wasn't until the foreman heard about it that we decided to deal with it, he continued. And here we are, dealing with it. Now, I could have gone back with Michael and the others, but this was turning into something I couldn't ignore. I was under enormous pressure to see this through and come to a satisfying conclusion, and I couldn't do that from behind a desk. I had to see this thing. I had to observe it with my own eyes and figure it out. I had a field kit with a small tent, a sleeping bag, and some basic necessities. I asked Michael to pick me up in the morning. He wasn't happy about it, but he figured I knew what I was doing. I think he might have had more faith in me than I did. There was no telling what was going to happen once the sun went down, but I intended to find out. So I stuck around, watching from a distance. The excavator just stood there, its signal orange arm still hanging in the air. A couple of birds had covered its joints in twigs and leaves, slowly transforming it into a makeshift metal tree. At some point, I must have nodded off. I think it was on top of that hill, just like Wilson. There isn't much to say about what happened at that time. I remember my eyes feeling heavy and my mouth being wide open. There was this weight to me, like I was sleeping under 2 feet of snow. At some point, I forced my eyes open, as if trying to escape a nightmare. The sun was just about to set. Long golden shadows stretched out over the clearing, giving it the look of a quiet fire. I could see deer carefully dragging branches through the dirt, slowly moving past the excavator. Families of squirrels and rabbits rushed past my feet, pulling whatever they could along, and I was just standing there, in front of the pile, holding a hand axe. My arms ached. Then I dipped into the dark again. Despite my eyes being closed, it was easier to move. It's like something shared its vision with me, giving me a sensation of where to move and how. I remember something stinging my hand. Perhaps I cut myself on something sharp, and yet my eyes stayed closed and my body limber. It wasn't so much a dream as it was an out-of-body experience. When I got too sore to continue, I crawled. I thought about the comfort of my tent, the warm sleeping bag nestled under my neck, the breathing fabric swaying in the wind, coloring my world a mild tint of cyan. But when I opened my eyes, that's not where I was. I was in the middle of the nest, resting on a pile of moss. The inside was lined with grass, leaves, and wildflowers. I specifically remember my half-open eyes looking into the dark center of a blue sunflower. My head leaned against something warm and leathery. I ran a tired hand over it. It felt like caressing a warm tire, segmented into armor-like plates. There was this sickly sweet smell coming from it, like burnt sugar. Looking down, I thought I saw fingers sticking out of the mud. They had a similar shape, but they were arranged in a line, like the legs of a centipede. I dreamed of wandering the woods, feeling the ground shift underneath my feet, desperately looking for a safe haven, somewhere I could call home. I found this one spot, surrounded by a circle of wildflowers, and I was so relieved. Someone had built me a home. In that dream, I remember promising myself to never leave, no matter how old or how large I got. That was my home, my safe harbor away from the storm. And I would ask all my friends to make my house bigger and stronger and safer. By the time I opened my eyes for real, I was curled up inside the middle of a nest. The moss was soft under my face. The early morning summer rays tried their best to creep through the labyrinth of brambles, managing to touch me across the cheek. I looked down at my hand, where there were 2 small bite marks. It didn't hurt, it didn't even itch. It was just there. I could barely make sense of it. There was no clear point where I could have crawled inside, and I had no memory of doing so. It's like I'd closed my eyes, and now I was there, moving out in 20 minutes. The sound startled me. Turns out I still had Michael's walkie-talkie. I kept hearing updates on the walkie-talkie, and a handful of people responding to one another. Something was happening, and they were on the move. It didn't take long before I could hear them, and not longer still before I saw them. No excavators or bulldozers this time, just jeeps and people. I picked up the walkie-talkie and pressed it. There was no response. My voice wasn't coming through. There were at least 5 jeeps, maybe 6, all full of men with white helmets. They were coming back to finish what they'd started. I had to try and get them to turn back until we figured this out. But for that I had to make my way out of the nest. And there was no way. I was completely closed off. Michael's voice came through in the distance. He didn't need a walkie-talkie for this. We all have our reservations, he said. But this thing is a safety hazard. This is a measure to deal with that hazard. That's all there is to it. They had signal orange jerry cans with the company logo, but more so, they carried bottles and metal cans, homemade firebombs, and from their holsters I could tell a couple of them were armed. An icy panic shot through my chest. Didn't they see I was in here? How could they miss me? I tried calling out to them, but there was no response. I twisted and turned, kicking at the side of the nest, but I couldn't find my way out. The branches and twigs were packed so tight they could keep me warm through the winter, if need be. I saw the first flame light up, and my voice went from a passionate plea to an animalistic screeching. There was a struggle among the crew as 2 of them stepped back, while the others lit up their firebombs. One by one, flames took hold. The homemade explosives weren't as much firebombs as they were fire starters, but the dry leaves and branches offered little resistance. I remember watching this one wildflower catch fire mere inches from my feet. A curious blue turned to charcoal black, and as I felt the heat across my skin, I knew this was no longer a dream. I twisted and turned. I thrashed, screamed, and cut myself bloody trying to get out. The smoke seeped into the gums of my teeth as I cried for help. In the branches, I could see the many creatures that had made it their home. Unlike me, they didn't protest. Maybe they realized it was already too late. They just sat there watching the fire spread. They wouldn't scream as the fire reached their fur and feathers, like captains going down with their ship. The smell of burnt fur choked me more than the smoke ever did. More fire from different directions. The crew was spreading out, making sure to get at every angle. Despite my struggle, I'd only managed to move inches. I couldn't dig, and I couldn't push anything out of the way. I was stuck, and the flames were getting closer. The heat stuck to the smoke, tainting the sweat pouring out of my forehead. I was going to burn alive in that hole, and they were never going to know. And no matter how much I screamed or cried or begged, they couldn't or wouldn't hear me. Then the fire reached my legs. That first burn seeped through my shoes. At that moment, the sting on my hand shot through my nerves. Something cold. My eyes were wide open, but I had the sensation of opening them again, like there was a second layer to my vision. And all of a sudden, I wasn't inside that nest anymore. I was on the outside, right next to the crew, being held back by 2 of Michael's guys. "Calm the fuck down," one of them demanded. "What the fuck's wrong with you?" They held an arm each, having wrestled me to the ground. "The fire," I gasped. You were killing me, Star. You're killing me, Star." "We're almost done," the other man said. "You need to calm down." One of them looked up. He slowly let go of my arm. Seconds later, the other did too. I looked up, seeing the crew spread out across the hills surrounding the pile, their silhouettes outlined by the fire starters in their hands. Something was coming out of the nest. The closest thing I can describe it as is a centipede. But you must understand, this thing was the size of a tiger. A massive white thing, segmented, with arm-long antennae at the front and rear. It moved slowly, each twitch of a leg calculated and deliberate. It had black patches on its chitin where the fire had licked it, and even now, it could move at breakneck speed if need be. The crew murmured. A couple took pictures. Michael moved up to it with a pump-action shotgun, as the others yelled at him to be careful. Part of me wanted to rush at him and tackle him to the ground. If I blinked hard enough, I could feel myself in the place of that creature. I could feel myself crawling in its place, in the dirt. Things got quiet as Michael raised a shotgun at it. My body rumbled as I felt the creature's trachea tremble. It wanted to be left alone. It was furious and terrified. Then a gunshot, but not from a shotgun. I don't think anyone had noticed Wilson walking up to us, pistol raised. He pointed it at Michael and spoke. As he did, something twitched in my arm. It was as if I knew the words before Wilson said them, like I felt them. "I want to go," Wilson said. "I just want to go away." I mouthed the words along with him and noticed, again, how Wilson's eyes were closed, just like when he'd thrown branches onto the pile. "Wilson," Michael called back. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" "Let me go," Wilson and I muttered. "Let me go away." "Then fucking go," Michael yelled back, turning his attention back to creature. The centipede moved as Michael raised his shotgun. Wilson raised his pistol, and as Michael took his shot, all hell broke loose. The shotgun went wild as a bullet grazed Michael's arm. Someone returned fire. Wilson kept shooting, seemingly at random. I think someone got him in the leg. Michael took another shot at the centipede, but it slithered away, rushing for the woods. A couple more shots rang out. Maybe a couple of them hit, but nothing decisive. The thing just kept going, and in the dark of the woods, even a startling white color can disappear. I stayed on the ground, writhing. I was scared, uncomfortable, cold, and at the same time, sweating. "Let me go," I muttered. "I'll go somewhere else." I knew Wilson said it too. I know the remaining birds said it. It was sung and whispered and chittered in every living thing in 1,000 different ways. And it would be said over and over and over as they all waited patiently to burn. By morning, the nest was a smoldering heap. Michael had only been grazed by the bullet, but one of his crewmen drove him to the hospital. Wilson had taken a shot to his left leg, but couldn't recall why or by whom. In the end, they all decided to just keep things quiet. An illegal burning and an illegal gunfight sort of canceled each other out. My job was made very simple, as the claim was canceled. Nothing more to investigate. My superiors weren't exactly pleased, but at least it was cleanly resolved, and I hadn't made things worse. They didn't involve the insurance companies, and there were no accusations leveled against surrounding logging companies. No suspicion of foul play. On paper, there was nothing out there but unfortunate natural circumstances. A couple of years have passed since. While the strange wound on my hand is healed, I still feel a little twitch every now and then, especially when I'm out in the woods. I might pick up the occasional stick without noticing or turning my head without knowing why. Ranger Wilson has since retired from his position, and I suspect this incident might have been the thing to push him over the edge. Looking back at it all, I know something is still out there. Whenever I close my eyes hard enough, I can still hear it asking all its friends for help. It's building a house, a bigger one with more friends. Perhaps next time, no one will notice it. Until they do. Story 3. My ex-girlfriend is a monster. She put me through hell. I won't beat around the bush. My ex was a monster. Yes, she lied and manipulated me, and sometimes she treated me like downright garbage. But that's not what I mean. My ex-girlfriend is a witch. Literally. I know. That's nothing too out of the ordinary. After all, there's plenty of people with strong roots to witchcraft, and some who actively practice it. For the most part, those aren't the kind of people I'm referring to. They don't have powers. Not real powers, at least Sadie could put them all to shame without so much as lifting her pinky finger. That's part why I stayed with her for so long. I didn't have a choice, and even now, I'm suffering the consequences from it. That's why I need to get this out there. I need help, and the police aren't going to be able to provide it. I've dug myself into a hole. No, not a hole. A trench. And I need to scramble out of it before it's too late. Look, I don't think I'll be able to make it this Friday. I have family plans, I said, avoiding Sadie's gaze. I could feel her emerald eyes dancing across my face, studying me, analyzing my movements for a tell. Oh, really? All night? Michael, you know the importance of a full moon. I sighed. She caught me. No, not all night. We'll probably be done around 10. I didn't have family plans, and Sadie knew it. She gave me one last stern glance before going back to doing her makeup. Be here at 9:30, please. I really don't want to be late again. I cursed myself for being so spineless the whole drive to Sadie's cabin. I didn't know it at the time, but that woman had a spell over me, one that made it nearly impossible to refuse her. Still, I couldn't help feeling useless. As I pulled into the lot, I took a deep breath and tried to smooth out any wrinkles in my suit. Sadie lives in a forest on the outskirts of town. Strange, yes, but there was something oddly enchanting about it. It fit her, but it's not the only reason she stays there. Babe, I'm here, I said as I let myself in the front door. Oh, hi. A young, red-haired girl stood from the couch and extended a hand. My name's Allie. I've heard a lot about you. I took note of the tremble in her hand and the quiver in her voice as I subdued the urge to furrow my brows. I accepted her handshake, lightly so as not to frighten her more than she already was. Pleasure's all mine. No need to be timid. I'm probably not as bad as Sadie says I am. Not so much as a giggle. Tough crowd. No, she hasn't said anything bad about you, I promise. I dash. Sweetheart, are you scaring my guest? Please be kind to her. She's new to this. Sadie called from her bedroom. Don't worry, I'm playing nice. I retorted, turning back to the terrified girl before me. Her eyes were wide as saucers, staring at me as if she was a deer in headlights. Just then, Sadie emerged from her room, saving me from the awkward interaction. Well, how do I look? She asked, spinning to show off her black dress. Stunning, I replied, my mouth falling open. It was true. Sadie looked beautiful. Not only did her dress look great, but her makeup was immaculate, and her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes glimmered. Sadie knew that she looked good, and she reveled in the attention. We should get going, she said, head held high. We'll need a bit of time to prepare. Allie glanced at her, then back to me. I shrugged, following my girlfriend out the door. As we began to walk down a path that led further into forest, I tugged Sadie's hand. Hey, can I talk to you about something? Allie, you go ahead. We'll catch up. Sadie pursed her lips, presumably already aware of where the conversation was headed. Once Allie was out of earshot, I hissed, who the hell is she? That girl can't be older than 16. She doesn't need to be here for this. Sadie's eyes flickered with vague annoyance. She's a family friend. Her bloodline has been associated with the occult for centuries. She shot me a glare before continuing forward. I wanted to press for more information, but something told me that I would not be a happy camper if I did. So that left me with no choice but to trot and catch up to the pair of women stalking along the trail before me. The tension in the air was palpable as we walked. I didn't fully know what the night had in store for us. I had assisted with Sadie's moon rituals before, but each one differed from the last. And to top it all off, this was the first time she'd asked me to dress up. That alone told me that this night was going to be special. A short time later, we found ourselves at a clearing. It was familiar to me, but it felt more ominous than usual, more foreboding. It was as if the forest was trying to warn me. At the edge of the tree line opposite us sat a decaying storage shed. Sadie and I continued toward it, Allie in tow. The moon shone down on us as we walked, illuminating our path, its glow radiant among the stars. My heart rate began to gradually increase as I approached the door to the broken-down hut. This was how it always went. I'd have to help Sadie drag some poor, barely conscious martyr out of the tiny shed. then prepare them for the ritual. That's why, when the door swung open and I was met with the sight of an empty space, my brows furrowed. Babe, where's the sacrifice? They didn't escape, did they? I asked, turning to face her. Behind my girlfriend, I noticed that Allie was trembling harder than ever. I locked eyes with Sadie, whose lips had parted into a knowing grin. My blood turned to ice as the dots connected in my head. The suit, Allie, the empty shed. It all made perfect sense. Michael, we've been dating for long enough that I think it's time to initiate you. I love you, and I want you to experience what it's like to have power. Think of it as a gift. Sadie, please. I don't want this. I don't want to be Dash. Sure, she said, reaching toward me. Go to sleep. Sadie gently pressed 2 fingers against my forehead, and then, before I could protest further, the world went black. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes to find myself staring at a ceiling, one that I recognized. As my senses slowly returned, I realized that I was lying in Sadie's bed. Oh, good, you're awake. I snapped my head in her direction, slower than I would have liked. I felt groggy and weighed down like I was underwater. What did you do to me? I croaked, struggling to get the words out. Before she could respond, a voice that was not my own erupted from my mouth. What did she do to you? You mean, what did she do to us? I didn't ask for any of this either. My mind was reeling, failing to process what had just happened. A deep voice had spoken using my mouth. I didn't black out or feel control of my body shift to another entity. It was as if something was sharing the driver's seat with me. Something that I didn't welcome in. Sadie frowned. The ritual was unsuccessful. Allie passed out halfway through, the poor thing. I'm still trying to find a way to reverse it. I'm sorry, Michael. Zoro's is going to take up residence with you for a while. Story 4. I've found the woman he loved first, and he's screaming. There's hammering at the door. He's screaming again. Rachel, Rachel. I'm on the cold tiles, clutching the kitchen knife tighter with each bang. I know he'll get in eventually. I know he will, and that'll be that. So I lie here. The only place left to go is memory. Every day, I have to remember more and more. It was our first Christmas together. We've been shopping in town. We just bought this place. You can have anything you want. I'd said anything, within reason. I asked for perfume. He insisted he knew the one I'd like. I'd never worn it before in my life. It smelt like vinegar and wine, acidic, dark, someone else. But beginnings are a time for change, and it felt like love. Love that rearranges you. My hair the way he liked it. The clothes he picked. Everything I was in relation to him. Nothing else allowed in. Not work, not children, just him. Then gradually, things fall away, erode. Rough edges sharpen the points. You realize that it's easier to love an idea than a person and you're angry, but you're not angry with him. Why doesn't he understand that? You're angry at the fact that you're back where you were and everything's the same. Everything except you. Older, bent to shape around him. Rachel, he shouts again. One night though, the first splinter, the first crack. I wanted to go out, just to walk, eat, exist outside this place. What's out there we don't have here? He asked. When I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm. No, that was it. One no, and we both knew. Then last week, I found the statement. An account I didn't know, money to her. 8 years together. Money away from us, money to her. Since then, there have been presents. Cooking. Rachel. He didn't talk about her. Of course he didn't. Talking would solidify. Talking would leave too many shards of memory for later casual denial. Angrier all the time, I went looking. I didn't want to find it, but knew I would. A box, tucked away, recently moved. Photos, toys, letters. Letters from her, desperate. Letters begging him not to hurt himself. Others accusing him of things, of what he might have done. I stared at her face in the pictures, and then I saw it. I saw what he was turning me into. The same clothes, the same hair, the same look in the eyes. I tied my hair like hers, sprayed the birthday perfume, untouched for months and surely hers. I walked down the stairs, each step taking too long, as I tried to block out the visions of what was about to come. I told him I was leaving. He screamed, "Not again, not again," and he threw the boiling pan at me. Skin stripped from my leg as I ran. And now I'm here, knife in hand, door trembling at his fists. He's still screaming it, over and over. Rachel, Rachel, Rachel's not even my name. I suppose it must have been hers. Story 5. I clean out my bathroom, and now I think I threw away the real me. I spent most of yesterday reorganizing my bathroom. I wasn't planning on it. I just went to grab some floss and ended up on the floor, knee-deep in plastic bins and expired products. I think we all have that one drawer or cabinet, the one where things go to die. Mine happens to be where I've been storing almost a decade of backup skincare, hair tools, and half-used personal hygiene products. It wasn't hoarding. I swear, I just like what I like. When I find a shampoo that works, I buy 5. If a deodorant smells good and goes on smooth, I'm sticking with it until the end of time. Call it habit, call it brand loyalty, call it overconsumption. I always saw it as being prepared. Until yesterday. At first it was oddly satisfying. Tossing dried up mascaras, grouping razors together in a little tray, lining up my backup moisturizers like soldiers. I felt like I was reclaiming space, taking inventory of my life. Then I started noticing patterns. 3 of the same hairbrush, all open but barely used. 4 tubes of toothpaste, the exact same kind, same size, bought years apart but somehow all open from the same end. 5 sticks of deodorant, the same brand, same scent, different degrees of wear. I couldn't remember using more than one. That was fine. Maybe I had a weird thing where I open stuff, forget, and open a new one. I tried to ignore it, but there was this weight to everything. Like my belongings were watching me, waiting for me to make a decision. Each time I picked something up, I felt like I was peeling something loose, like a layer of myself that had crusted over. I rubbed labels until the ink came off, snapped open bottles just to make sure they were empty. I was being ruthless. No more stockpiling. No more keeping things just in case. I told myself I couldn't bring anything new into this place until I made space for it. Real space, not just in drawers. In me, I think that's when it started. I began to feel like I was downsizing more than my bathroom. Every cotton swab, every crusted cap, every crumbling face mask. I threw away like I was pruning apart my body, not metaphorically. It felt physical, like I was rubbing off my own edges to make myself smaller. And it wasn't just trash, it was my skin cells, my hair, dried saliva on floss, my scent preserved in lotions, my fingertips pressed into caps and jars and tubes for years. It hit me that our DNA is everywhere. Every time I use something, I leave a trace behind. A residue, a record, and I don't think I ever really understood how much of me I've left in this apartment. How much I've sealed into drawers and lids and trash bins. Not memories, pieces. I was in the middle of wiping out a little white organizer bin when I found a strand of my hair curled into the corner. Oh, brittle, almost clear. I picked it up without thinking and dropped it into the trash. But then I paused. I had cut my hair 2 months ago. Short, that strand was long, much longer than it should have been, and it was tied at one end. I stared at the trash bag. I had filled it with bits of myself. Not just junk, not just clutter, but discarded versions, past selves that had slowly been rubbed away over time, left behind in packaging and residue and lint. I kept going. I couldn't stop. Then I found a box. It was shoved in the far back corner of the undersink cabinet, small, white, unmarked. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember seeing it the last time I cleaned. Inside the box was a sealed bag. Inside the bag was trash. Used floss picks, cotton pads soaked in micellar water, Q-tips with black smudges on the ends, bits of hair, a contact lens, a Band-Aid, all of it mine. But I never saved this. I never bagged it. I never put it away. I sat on the floor for a long time. I didn't move. I just stared at the bag and started breathing slower. Something wasn't right. I looked up and caught my reflection in the mirror. Nothing wrong, just me, but when I tilted my head, it didn't move right away, like there was a lag, a delay in the glass. I didn't sleep last night. I kept the light on. I lay in bed thinking about every item I've ever thrown away, every towel I've donated, every empty bottle I've dropped into bin. How many pieces of me have been replicated, preserved, shelved? I went back in the bathroom this morning, and the trash I had bagged yesterday was gone. Not taken to the curb, not moved to the hallway, just gone. The only thing under the sink was the box again. Same size, same placement. But now it was full of items I hadn't thrown away yet. Things I was going to get rid of today. A toothbrush I hadn't opened. A serum I was still using. A nail file I swore I just had in the drawer. I opened the medicine cabinet. Every product was full. New. Lined up neatly. I don't remember doing that. I don't know what I threw away. I don't know which version of me I am. And when I smiled at my reflection, it smiled back too soon. Story 6. For Sale. Haunted Furby. Furbies are a quintessential late 90s children's toy. Everyone, and I mean everyone, had one. They were beloved, furry, pocket-sized little gremlins. And as a child, I spent many hours teaching it English. Sometime in my formative years, I grew disinterested with my squat little furball. And it ended up like most toys that I outgrew, stuffed away in a box under the basement stairs. Flash forward 20 or so years, and I am helping my parents clean out their house. They wanted to downsize and said that anything I found downstairs I could keep. Most of it was junk accumulated over 40 years of home ownership. But there were a few keepsakes hidden away. I found a few neat Baltimore Orioles memorabilia pieces, some vintage board games, and some missing photo albums. Nestled in a box near the back of the space under the stairs was my old Furby. It was a tad dusty, but all things considered, it looked good for its age. After dusting it off, I could see its powder blue fur, bright yellow beak, and closed plastic eyes. I had no use for it, and I doubted it worked after all these years. But something compelled me to take it. Nostalgia, I guess. I finished up decluttering, ferried the old junk to the donation center, packed my finds into my car, and headed home. I sorely regret bringing that little plastic demon into my home. It started off innocuous enough. I had placed a Furby on the top shelf of a bookcase in my basement. I came down the other day to find it sitting on the floor. I figured it had fallen overnight and had landed right side up. I put it back on the shelf and went on with my day. The next day I came down into the basement, only to find Furby sitting on the ground again. This time, it was further away from the bookcase. I rearranged the shelf so that Furby couldn't fall. I found it on the floor again 2 days later. We engaged in this back and forth for about a week before I relented and let Furby stay on the floor. It wasn't long after that I heard it speak. I just about jumped out of my skin when I heard, "Who by?" coming from my pitch-black basement. Furby was sitting on the carpet in its normal spot, eyes open. I could see its beak slowly moving as it distorted as it emanated from the speakers within. I checked its battery compartment, and sure enough, there were 2 corroded AA batteries. I trashed the batteries and did my best to clean the corrosion out. A few days later, it spoke again. Inside the battery compartment were 2 fresh batteries. I must have replaced the batteries and forgot. I removed the batteries again, since Furbies are known to never shut up until they're out of juice. Imagine my surprise when it speaks again. Play, yumwa. Man, even without batteries, it wouldn't stop talking. I eventually got annoyed enough to just throw Furby out. It was sad to see a childhood friend be relegated to the trash bin, but goddamn was it getting on my nerves. That blue-furred fucker was back the next day. I found it in the kitchen, next to the oven. It was a little ragged looking on account of it being in a trash can. I threw it back in a bag and took the trash to the curb. It was back the next day, repeatedly saying, Ata. No clue what that meant, but I was getting tired of this little bastard showing back up in my house. I took it to the dump and yeeted it as far as I could into the refuse. It was back again the next day. I took a sledgehammer to it. The next day it was back, all in one piece. Ata. It wouldn't stop talking. Thrown in a box and buried, attached to a firework and sent to the heavens, set on fire. Next day you'd hear Ata, coming from some random closet or room. I tried everything and I couldn't get rid of it. After many months of this, I gave up. I started letting it stay in the guest bedroom. That seemed to please a plastic imp, at least for about a month. Last week, I started finding eviscerated critters around my house. It started with a bisected mouse, then a vivisected chipmunk, and finally a decapitated rabbit. I knew Furby was the one behind this, but what was I supposed to do? I couldn't get rid of it, and I had little desire to surrender my home to a toy. I reached my breaking point today. I woke up to a searing pain in my foot. I looked down to see Furby sitting by my feet, chewing on a pinkish red mass. That's when I noticed the source of my agony. Furby, a plastic children's toy, had chewed off 2 of my toes. Feed, kept repeating from its beak. The once cute eyes had been heavily damaged by my removal attempts and now radiated a kind of malice. If I didn't leave right then, I was going to become Furby food. The ER docs inquired into the source of my injuries, but I couldn't say that a possessed toy ate them. I lied and said a lawnmower accident. After getting discharged, I grabbed a quick change of clothes and my laptop and checked into a hotel. I guess I need to sell my house. Any takers? It comes with a free Furby. Story 7. I discovered a bazaar where blood and bone were the only currency. It wouldn't let me leave until I bought something. I have a skull in the corner of my office. It sits on a shelf a little above my eye line. It watches me and fills me with great dread. I acquired it at an open-air bazaar in China. If you wish for a street or a city or some more definite form of location, I'm afraid I cannot give it to you already. The memories fuzz around the edges of my head as I try to recall them, but at their center is a clear image I must never forget. So I write this to keep the molder from overtaking the whole. When I was in my 20s, I was fascinated with the world and its variety. Bored with school and its routine, I decided to forego my studies and take a more hands-on approach to life. I took the money I had saved for college and started a hitchhiking journey across the globe. I went everywhere: France, Spain, Italy, the Philippines. I even backpacked across India so I could better understand its people and cultures. But the crowning jewel of my travels was China. The Middle Kingdom, as it is sometimes called, fascinated me unlike any other place. Its culture and its history enthralled me. I wanted to know everything about it. It took years to get a tourist visa, but once I was there, I never wanted to leave. My eye was there for 2 years. In that time, I learned the language, traveled the countryside, and sought to learn everything I could. It was my dream to live there forever. Or, if that was impossible, at least die there. But then came the day I wandered into the other market. In a city I cannot now remember. There was a place where the locals gathered together to sell fresh produce and the most delicious street food. An open-air bazaar of sorts. The place was so friendly, so inviting, that I halted my trip entirely so I could stay longer in that beautiful place. While I was there, I chatted with the shopkeepers about their lives and their histories. With their words, they painted a rich tapestry of their culture, and soon I found myself calling many of them friends. They gave me tips on places to visit, good food to try, and on which market stalls sold the best products. I felt safe. I felt home. Then an incident occurred. It was a normal day. I had just purchased some ripe fruit from a familiar stall when I noticed something I had passed over many times before. It was a small side alley in the market, dark and thin, lie between two buildings. At a glance, I could see booths on the other side of the passage. I assumed it was another part of the market. Curious, I went closer to get a better look. I crossed the street and approached the opening. As I took my first steps into the gap, a stranger grabbed my arm and forcefully pulled me out. I was frightened. I turned to face my attacker. It was an old man, jowls hanging down to match the length of his abnormally large ears. His face was pockmarked with remnants of forgotten diseases he had conquered, and his eyebrows grew so thick they hung low across his eyes like fringe. His back was stooped and crooked, yet he walked with no cane, judging by the hand on my arm. He was stronger than he looked. I expected an altercation, but instead of anger in the stranger's eyes, I saw pure, unadulterated fear. He glanced at the alley, and it was as if he were looking directly into the gaping maw of a bloodlusted shark. His words were scattered and hard to understand, but the stranger managed to communicate that the area was off limits. He kept side-eyeing the alley, edging away from it. Looking around, I noticed that most of the vendors were also giving a wide berth. No one had set up shop in a 50-foot diameter area around the dark gap. Passers-by crossed the street when they came near it, holding their heads down and shuffling forward at a faster pace. "Do not go." Those were the stranger's parting words. He shuffled away, looking nervously behind him, as if the alley were going to pursue him. I took him at his word, at first, but even with the new fear I felt toward this strange passage, another feeling grew: curiosity. Each time I returned, my fascination grew. It was like a fungus on my brain. At first, it was just double glances as I walked past. Then I began to think about the alley even when I was not there. Once the fear had subsided, I often stood across the street from it and tried to peer through to the other side. What was over there? I tried to ask my new friends about the alley. Each time I did, it felt like the air itself froze in place. Without hesitation, they each told me the same thing: do not go through it. One person, How Young, I pressed a little harder for information. He sold fresh fruit, his specialty being peaches. I had gotten especially close to him over my stay there. Why? I asked, why should I not go over there? Isn't it part of the market? How Young tried his best to explain, but to me, his words still felt cryptic. He told me the alley was the only way to get into that section of the city, a place he called the other market. He was right about that. In my own investigations, I had tried several times to find other openings, other paths into that section of stalls, but came up with nothing. The alley was the only one. How Young went on to further explain that while there were people that did go inside on occasion, each time they did, they came back different. "There's nothing good over there," he said. "It's not worth it." Despite his warnings, my fascination grew. I was drawn to that alley, staring at it for hours and hours. My curiosity started feeling more like hunger. Many days I would strain my neck, trying to see what was happening on the other side. I just needed a glimpse, I told myself, and then I would be satisfied. One day I got my glimpse. I was yet again staring at that damned alleyway. The impulse to explore overtook me like a fever. It crept down my body and made me tremble with the desire. Emboldened by the feeling, I checked my surroundings for a moment. It was a busy day at the market. Everyone was preoccupied. No one was watching. Now was my chance. I made my way across the street and slid my way into the gap. It was colder than I expected in the alley. It had been a warm day, but I felt a chill as if I were passing through the deep shadow of a glacier. In the darkness, the sound of the world behind me became muffled. The street market hubbub faded to a dull murmur, then a whisper, then silence. when I had pushed through fully. It was as if the street outside no longer existed. I was in the other market. A tented booth was in the way when I got out of the alley. I moved my way around and got onto the street. My first observation? It was almost a mirror copy of the other bazaar. The same placement of booths, the same distance between vendors, even the same colors on the tents. But it wasn't entirely the same. There was something off. It was deserted of shoppers. I was the only customer there. Shopkeepers manned each booth, but they were the only other human beings in the whole place. Each stall sold a dizzying variety of goods, but it wasn't produce. Their shelves and stands were full of other strange items. Knives, dolls, symbols written on ragged material I couldn't identify. Across the surface of the nearest table were bones and devices with purposes I could not begin to understand. I was so taken by the goods that it took me a moment to notice the shopkeepers. All of them were smiling widely and focused directly on me. It was like each individual shop owner was standing ready for my business, and my business alone. I reasoned that since I was the only shopper on the street, that made sense. But the more they looked at me, the more uneasy I became. Their smiles were empty, the kind you give for an extra % gratuity. The kindness was transactional, and they were waiting for my side of the exchange. My curiosity had been sated. The feelings of danger were returning. I wanted to leave. Now, it took a moment for me to find the tent I had emerged behind. I went behind it, looking for the alley entrance, so I could return to my home turf, filled with safety, friends, and food. When I looked where the alley had been, it took a moment to process what I was seeing. My heart sank into my stomach. It was gone, where there had been a gap in the buildings. There was now a solid wall. It was like the buildings themselves had drawn together, closing the gap. You couldn't have stuck a knife in it. The crack was so tight. I looked up and down, hoping I had just misremembered the alley's placement. I hadn't. In my ever-frantic searching, I could find no openings of any kind. After combing over the block twice, the sun was getting low in the sky. I was desperate. I pushed through my discomfort and went to a booth owner. I asked how to get out of this market section. By something, the woman said, her teeth glinting in the red glow of the sunset. Not sure how this was supposed to help me. I looked at the table and tried to find the cheapest looking item. I picked up a small die with strange symbols painted on it in midnight black ink. I asked about its price. 1 leg. I was sure I hadn't heard her right. I asked again, and she responded the same. 1 leg. In the corner of the tent, I saw a dedeo, a sort of Chinese machete. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The concept seemed so absurd, so unreal, but the owner confirmed my suspicions when she grasped the blade's handle and turned back to face me. Would you like to pay now? I quickly set down the die and backed away. The owner made no move to follow me. They just kept smiling and informed me they had many other goods to choose from, and they were open to negotiating price. I went to several other booths and asked for directions on how I could leave. All said the same thing. Buy something. Each time I tried to select an item, the brutal prices were given with the same nonchalant attitude as the first. An eye, a hand, my genitals. They said this casually, as if they were simply speaking of different cash denominations. The sun had fallen by this point, and the sky was dark. It hung over me, a black expanse like a smothering blanket. There were no stars to tell direction. There was no moon. The only illumination came from the glare of the torches lighting up the wares, and the twinkle of candles coming from the windows. The silence of the night was deafening. At any crowded street market, there is always a dull murmur of noise, an underlying layer that a patron may stand on and know that they are not alone. There is always some transaction, some exchange being made, and quiet is never allowed to linger long. That rule did not apply here. Soundlessness reigned. I could not even hear the breaths of the individual shopkeepers. I don't know if they even did breathe. They stared ahead at me, waiting. My purchase, it seemed, was the only thing that mattered. I started to panic. I began to try every method of escape. I ran up the length of the street, but just when I thought I had made a good distance from my starting point, I would find myself back where I had begun. I tried all the doors to the building, but they were locked. I went crazy with fear, and tried to bash the wooden slats in with the heel of my foot. When I was finished, they still stood resolute and unmarked, no longer caring for safety or propriety. I began to scale the sides of the buildings. My fingers scrabbled to find any foothold or handhold that would move me upwards. My fingers caught in the crevices, and at one point my fingernail was pulled out of my flesh by a jutting nail. I continued on, ignoring my bleeding finger. I had to get out. I needed to get out. Nothing else mattered. I managed to get to the roof. I stood atop it and saw the market on the other side. My market, my heart soared, my friends, my regular haunts. They were waiting down there and beckoning to me like sirens, and I, a sailor with a death wish, I quickly made my way down to the other side. When I dislodged from the wall and turned to face my freedom, my blood went cold. Instead of my friends, I saw those same strange booths, those strange perverse shopkeepers smiling and waving, all waiting for me to buy. I was back. I had never really left. It was weeks before I broke down and bought something. Time became strange and quiet. It passed like a fever dream. I lived off the fetid pools in the gutter and caught rats that had the misfortune of being trapped in there with me. I ate their flesh raw. Unable to purchase the fire starters, sold 2 boots over for my makeshift hovel. It would have cost me my tongue to purchase. After all, I couldn't part with that. At some point, the rats ran out and the water dried up. I began to starve. I could see the bones in my forearms, and the constant gnawing of hunger began to drive me insane. I counted my ribs to pass the time. It was in my lowest that I had a sudden moment of clarity. It was the middle of the day, and the sun was beating me about the head with its heat. I had resorted to drinking my own urine, which had taken on a dark brown cast. It smelled foul. My mind was fractured. But one coherent thought shot through me, unifying the pieces for a moment. It was as if someone had spoken directly into my ear. I was going to die. I was going to die unless I bought something. The bargaining began. I went up the length of the street, shuffling on malnourished legs. It was painful, but it was possible. I greeted shopkeepers and began to haggle. I tried my earlier strategy of choosing cheap-looking items, but found that looks were deceiving. These often were the most expensive. One small handkerchief would have cost me all 4 of my limbs. I tallied up the cost of all the items, trying to determine what I was willing to lose, so I could leave this place. The shop owners would not be talked down. If they wanted an arm, they might settle for a forearm, but never a hand. If they wanted a leg, a foot would never do. 5 fingers might become 4, but never 1. That was when I found a miracle. I found the skull. It looked like it could have belonged to some undiscovered species of monkey. Or was a human skull deformed beyond all comprehension. I had felt its gaze on me as I began my journey from booth to booth, trying to barter for my escape from this hell. Its presence had unnerved me so much that I had passed it over on my first journey up and down the street. On my second go-through, I reluctantly asked its price. 1 finger. The shopkeeper pointed upwards with his index. Ironically, I felt excitement. I had found it, the cheapest item. Its price was still steep. Had it been at the beginning of my stay at the other market, I would have balked at paying. But with starvation comes context, and a finger began to feel like a bargain. I almost agreed to the trade on the spot, but I made the mistake of looking at the skull again. Its empty sockets felt like 2 holes of unfathomable depth. As I looked, I imagined myself falling into them until my body and soul were dissolved in perpetual night. I hated it. Even in my weakened state, I wanted nothing to do with that skull. But my third journey up and down the street made me so dizzy I had to sit down. I was running out of time. I went to the booth and agreed to the skull's price. I held my hand on the table and closed my eyes. I braced for the impact of the Deo. When nothing came, I opened them again. The shopkeeper had their hand extended, the handle of the blade facing towards me. The message was clear. I took the Deo and went about planning the best way to remove my finger. I considered a single chop, but I wanted to limit the damage done to the rest of my hand. I couldn't get the right angle from that vantage. Besides, I needed to do the chopping with my offhand. When I had gone to take the index finger from my left, the shopkeeper had shaken their head. Other hand, the right one. It took an hour, but I eventually settled on a course of action. I took a deep breath and pulled my index finger back in a sharp jerk. The pain reached me before the snap. I bit into my tongue, tasting fresh blood as I made sure there was a break in the bone by jerking my finger back and forth. The burning in my hand was white hot, and I felt the broken ends of bone grating against each other. I screamed into my closed mouth, trying to muffle the sound, hoping that my adrenaline would keep me going. I took the Deo and began sawing. Blood soaked out to the break in my skin and smothered the length of the blade. The weapon was sharp, but not razor. I pushed and pulled to help the blade sever the skin, muscle, and tissue, the last things keeping my finger on my hand, and me in this wretched place. At one point, the blade caught on a tendon, and I felt it rip from its supports in my hand, pulling out in a white string that dangled and jumped. I swallowed down bile and kept going. I had to finish. One final pull, and the finger pulled off from my hand in a spurt of blood. I threw it down on the counter and shoved my hand into my armpit. I needed to get out of here, and then maybe I could find a doctor who could stop the bleeding. The shopkeeper took their time, examining the finger, going over it again and again. At one point, they took out a jeweler's glass and examined the severed end. I saw spots and I dry heaved. After 2 long minutes, the shopkeeper nodded. My offering was satisfactory. He extended the skull to me. I don't want it. I told him. He just shook his head at me. You buy it, you take it. I didn't have time to argue. I was an inch away from passing out from pain and blood loss. I took the skull in my good hand and shambled away. Somehow, I knew where to go. I made my way up the street. I found the tent where I had emerged from the alley. That all felt like an eon ago. I held my breath, praying the shopkeepers had not lied to me. My heart leapt. There was the alley, open. I could see the markets on the other side. I went as fast as I could to it, afraid I would blink and the alley would close. I threw my body into the slit and pushed forward with force. I kept waiting for some sort of resistance, some force to keep me in the other market. It never came. In a burst of speed, I left the alley. I was bombarded with a blast of people shouting, haggling, and complaining about subpar product. I was back. It might have been the joy at escaping, or it might have been that my ears had grown accustomed to the silence of the other market. Regardless, in my starved and broken state, it was all too much. My eyes rolled back into my head, and I collapsed in the mud. I awoke 2 days later in a small hospital. Hao Yang was sitting next to me. Apparently, despite my weeks inside the other market, no time had passed in the outside world. Hao Yang remembered seeing me eyeing the alley, and the next moment saw me emerging with my bloodied hand, looking half crazed and starved out of my mind. He knew what had happened immediately. He was the one who brought me to the hospital. On my bedside table was the skull. Hao Yang refused to touch it. He sat himself on the other side of the bed and tried his best never to look at it. He refused to speak of the skull or the bazaar when I began asking questions. Once he was sure I was recovering, he stopped showing up at the hospital. I think we frightened him, the skull and I. After being discharged, things changed. People avoided me, crossing the road at my approach. People that were normally friendly became nervous in my presence. The market, once a friendly place, now felt cold. No one talked to me unless I first addressed them. No one even looked at me if they could help it. Ironically, the only welcoming part of the market was the alley. It was always there, waiting, almost beckoning me to step through again. In those moments, I tried to remember what the other market had put me through, but it didn't stop the curiosity from digging into my mind like a bad itch. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I decided to go back to America. I had acquired no souvenirs on my world exploring trip. I didn't have room for them, but the skull followed me home. I tried to leave it in 3 separate hotel rooms. Each time, it would appear again in my bag, nestled comfortably in my clothes and watching me from the depths of my suitcase. On the boat home, I tossed it into the ocean. That night, when I came to my bunk, it was on my bedspread. A few drops of salt water graced its cranium like a perverted aspersion. It stared up at me with those empty sockets, and I could feel something inside me withering. I stopped trying to get rid of it. It was better to just ignore it. Ignore the decay, ignore the rot. Just let it stay and fester, and hope that one day time will take it from you. When I returned, it found a new home on my office shelf. It must like it there, because it doesn't move around as much. It's been years since then. Years that I purchased with my finger at the other market. But even still, I am not free. My time is running out. I've finally discovered the true price of Skull. The fine print I passed over my haste to pay the low price. The doctors are calling it early onset Alzheimer's. I know better. Memories run together now in my head, like wet paint splashed over my cortex. I no longer remember Spain, France, the Philippines. Even now, I strain under the gaze of the skull to remember Hao Yang's face, the taste of fresh peaches at his market stall. The skull has left me only with my time at the other market untouched. But I know it will take that too, in time. It will take all of me. Maybe if I hadn't been so stingy, maybe if my survival had been worth an arm or a leg, maybe then I wouldn't be paying the dividends. But it's too late now. A final bit of advice from a man senile, by his own hand. Don't be cheap. It will cost you. Story 8. The thing that happened to Chris. I never met my cousin Chris. The family didn't talk about him much, and the only memories I have of him are through dusty, candid photos on my aunt's walls and posed Christmas and Easter pictures that mark my grandparent halls and mantle. He disappeared when I was 3, gone in the night, leaving remnant of a boy in my aunt's solemn house. During Christmas, my mom told my aunt about my newfound interest in VHS and camcorders. When Mom told her, Aunt Janelle's eyes went misty and nostalgic, and I realized that what I first thought was a touch too much eggnog was a shared interest with my cousin. Chris loved filming when he was your age, she'd said, voice choked up with emotion. Your Uncle Don and I got a camcorder one year, and God, he and his friends, they filmed everything. Her head was shaking as she went on, talking about all the bike tricks and attempted parkour and other preteen buffoonery captured forever by Chris and his friends. When she called Mom today, I expected the usual neighborhood gossip and middle-aged shit talk, but Aunt Janelle said she found Chris's camera. She asked if I wanted to come and see the videos, to get to know my unknown cousin in a way I hadn't before. She left me with the boxes in their basement, and I settled in front of the couch as the first clip played. The usual still form of my cousin takes up the old TV. He's smiling, laughing at something his filming friend had said before the camera rolled. The next few minutes are Chris and his friends goofing around, shoving each other, attempting skateboarding tricks, lighting firecrackers. The 4 of them are 13 or 14, and it's easy to see the similarities between them and my group of friends. The next few hours pass in a blur of clips. It's almost addictive, watching my cousin and his friends, Jay, Alex, and Marcus, do stupid things together in the concrete monotony of my town's bridges and underpasses. One tape, labeled November 13th, 98, opens on a different scene. Instead of tunnel or road, or even someone's yard, it's the woods. The camera quality makes the probably golden woods look yellow, and the shadows of trees long and foreboding. For a few seconds, it's only a pair of worn sneakers pushing through piles of dead leaves. Jay, you dick! Is the first audible thing over white noise and the crunching of leaves underfoot. The camera flicks upwards just in time to see Chris shove Jay into a pile of leaves. Jay gets up and shoves back, and they start to wrestle as Alex's voice cuts in. Guys, come on. Alex says from behind the camera. Stop it. We have to get there before dark. Chris and Jay separate, laughing as they both shake leaves off their jackets. There are a few more minutes of quiet hiking in Turcut, with jokes before the trees thin out and the camera focuses on the old quarry. It pans across the gash in the land, the sun painting the walls as the lowest parts darken. It's silent for a moment before Jay speaks again. Nice hole in the ground. Top 10, honestly. The camera flicks toward him as Jay snags a rock from the ground and hurls it into the quarry's depths. The camera tracks the stone as it falls. Static taking over the view as the zoom feature loses focus of the rock. The static ends and Chris and Jay's banter takes over the audio. They're jokingly shoving each other closer to the edge before more rocks fall into the quarry's shady bottom. The next few minutes are just the four of them fucking around, climbing trees and wrestling around as the surrounding woods grow darker and darker. They throw more rocks, but instead of fading into the darkness, the rocks fall until abruptly blinking out into the blackness of the quarry like shooting stars. Despite the fuzzing audio and footage, the clip is fun to watch. It's easy to imagine myself alongside them, throwing rocks around and goofing off. It's dusk when someone suggests heading back, the dying sun turning everything more sinister and alien as it lengthens shadows. The video is already bad quality, seems poor in the dark, every shadow swimming with dark, snowy spots. More joking ensues as they turn, the trees thickening again as the woods consume the camera's view. More walking and talking. I swear, Dana's been coming on to me all week. Jay says Alex is filming him from behind, taking in Jay and Chris backs as they walk. Sure she has, Chris says dryly, just like Emily is in science. It's not my fault. All the ladies want a piece of it. White noise obscures the audio for a moment, and dancing static overtakes the TV screen. And the static slowly fizzles out, and when the camera's view clears, it's on Marcus instead of Chris and Jay. He's looking around the darkened trees, head moving in rapid motions like a bird. He slowly turns back to the group, squinting against the flashlight's beam as someone behind the camera turns one on. "Did you hear that?" Marcus asks. "Hear what?" Chris says. "I think it was wind, dude." "No," Marcus says quickly, whirling back around. It was like Marcus's voice fades off as he goes almost unnaturally still. "Like what?" Jay asks. Marcus doesn't respond. Marcus, what'd it sound like? Jay asks. Leaves crunch as Jay walks closer, gripping Marcus's arm to turn him around. "Did it sound like your mom when I..." Jay goes silent as he turns Marcus back around. Marcus's eyes are wide and unfocused. Blood that looks vividly red even in the washed-out view of the camera drips from his nose, slowly welling up over his upper lip. Marcus gasps suddenly, his eyes fluttering against the flashlight's harsh white beam. His eyes flick around, first to Jay, then to the flashlight. Then he stares directly into the camera. The blood from his nose drips down his lip, and his 1,000-yard stare feels like it's boring into me. An icy shiver runs down my spine at the sight, and Marcus's eyes stare unblinkingly at me. "What?" Marcus asks slowly. "How's it going?" comes from behind me, and I spin around with flinch. Aunt Janelle is smiling widely, holding a plate of pizza rolls. Good," I say after a second. "It's going good. It's pretty fun seeing what they did." Aunt Janelle hums happily and sets the plate on the table behind me. "Oh, yeah, my Chris and his friends were great. Best boys I knew." Her eyes go misty again as she stands, the dying light of sun outside highlighting her graying hair. She stills for a moment, looking down. "They were something," she murmurs. Her eyes move on to me again, and she smiles a little. "Well," she says, "I'll leave you to it." The closing of the basement door signals her exit, and when I turn again, Marcus's 1,000-yard stare almost takes me by surprise. I resume the clip and settle back down, the scorching cheese of the pizza rolls sticking to the roof of my mouth. "What?" Marcus asks again. "Are you okay?" Chris asks from behind the camera. "Yeah, you got all weird, dude." Jay says. Marcus nods, wiping at the blood from his nose like it's a second thought as he turns and resumes walking. "Yeah," he says faintly. "Yeah. Well, what did it sound like?" Alex asks, the camera shaking as he jogs after Marcus. "What?" "That noise," Alex says. "What?" Marcus repeats. "The noise." Jay yells, more leaves crunching as he runs towards Marcus. "You said it sounded like something, then you got all weird." The clip's audio goes fuzzy for a moment, and the visual quickly follows. The visuals return, and the camera shakes as Alex turns around. "What?" Static overtakes Alex's words as the camera turns to Chris. He's also looking around, the flashlight in his hands flickering and sending sporadic bursts of light at trees and the ground. The audio clarity sharply returns right as Jay yells, but the view continues to shake as Alex rapidly moves. What the fuck? The camera spins, trees and the grayness of the woods blurring past before abruptly stops. It's on the ground now, at an angle as it leans against a rock or something. Dirt smudges the lens, and the dark woods cause part of the image to look static and swimming. However, my cousin and his friends appear somewhat clearer. Jay is shoving Marcus back, but instead of friendly and teasing, it's harsh and angry. Did you fucking grab me? Jay yells, Marcus spilling to the ground as Jay pushes him again. Chill out. Chris yells, running into frame and pulling Jay back. Alex's boot enters the frame's edge as he moves forward, stopping short of the other three. He was grabbing at me and shit. Jay yells, shoving Chris off. Seriously, what the fuck? Guys. Alex's voice cuts in, but Jay interrupts it. Stop being all weird. Guys. Fucking what? Did you hear that? Alex's voice is quiet and hesitant as he turns to look at Jay, Chris, and the now standing Marcus. Hear what? Chris asks. Like someone running. Alex whispers harshly. Like not one of us. They descend into hurried whispers. Jay looking frustrated as Alex and Chris get closer and quieter, and Marcus looking around hesitantly. They separate with a sigh from Chris as he walks out of view, coming back with the flashlight that's still weakly flickering. Alex picks up the camera, staring into the lens and carefully wiping the dirt with his sleeve. Jay and Marcus are whispering over Alex's shoulder as he messes with the camcorder. The unfocused with behind them are still static and bubbling. Jay scratches at his chin as they talk, eyes rolling as Alex's magnified eyes peer into the camera and me. Alex spins suddenly, the camera jolting as he turns to look into the woods behind him, and the view erupts into static. The movement makes me jump, and I blink rapidly, trying to calm back down. Rewinding the clip a few seconds, it looks like Alex turns to nothing, only Jay and Marcus arguing. I slow the clip, locked on the dark, distorted woods as they move in slow motion. A slow, gray movement peeks out among the trees, but it honestly looks like the camera is just picking up movement in the trees. By the time the static ends, they've resumed walking. The camera, now with shitty night vision on, is angled on Alex's feet as he walks, trudging through piles of leaves and debris. No one is talking now. The camera twitches up a bit, showing Chris and his flashlight leading the pack. Someone mumbles something, Jay maybe, and he's quickly shushed. Suddenly, they pause. The camera flicks up, showing Marcus looking into the trees behind them, white and green and ghostly in the night vision. Wind ruffles his hair, and Chris's flashlight highlights his face as he turns, whispering, "Run." Then it's just leaves in the ground and static. The camera swings every time Alex moves his arm, showing the upside-down woods, black now, interspersed with distorted gray. The audio goes into static, then the view too. Keep go. Then, ooh. Then, what? More distorted noise. There's a high, sharp noise, then a brief view of something gray and long, and then a slam. The camera slowly focuses again, and Chris is locking a door, the sliding glass door in the kitchen that leads into Aunt Janelle's backyard. The night vision is almost blinding in the kitchen's light, highlighting Chris' dirty knees and wide, rolling eyes. "What the fuck?" he says. "What the... how, Marcus?" Downstairs now. Jay yells and the camera turns down again, and they stumble down the basement stairs. The door slams, and it sounds nearly like it's happening now. Like if I were to turn around, I could see my cousin and his friend sprinting down the stairs. A noise snaps me out of the trance that the video put me in. The room is dark now, darker than it seems like it should be for this time at night. The only thing giving light is the green-white glow of the night vision on the TV. Another noise from the TV ropes me back in. Jay and Chris are crouching beside the couch, heads snapping around to look at the windows. Glancing over my shoulder, I can see where they'd be, right between the couch and the bookshelf. Marcus is nowhere to be seen. The night vision is off, and the only noises are the creaks of the house, their panting breaths, and the quiet popping of static. What did it do to Marcus? Alex asks, his voice a rasp behind the camera. I don't know. Chris mumbles. The flashlight stopped, and it grabbed him. Jay breathes. Do you think it followed? Did you close the gate? The hair on the back of my neck prickles, my breathing speeding up to match theirs. The high noise might have been Marcus' scream, but what is it? There's a thud over the video, drawing my attention back. Chris's neck snaps around to look at the window above the TV. The camera follows. More bubbling, static-filled darkness. Then, a slow blur of gray. Someone gasps, someone swears, and the camera falls again. It's quickly picked up and refocused on the window. No, Chris says, no. Silence flows through the speakers, the popping of static accompanying it. A light flicks on outside the window, just as a light in the basement flicks off. It illuminated the top of the TV, then the rug, then the tips of Alex's sneakers and Chris's legs. It slowly gets brighter, then lights up like the sun, bathing everything in the video in a cold light. Someone screams and Alex frantically scoots backwards, dropping the camera as Chris grabs a bat and approaches the window. He's yelling, but static overtakes the audio as the light abruptly flicks off. A shaking flashlight beam turns on, skating over the couch and slowly up Chris's back. It's quaking as it slowly climbs a wall and hits the window. It glints off the glass, blinding the camera. A car, Alex mumbles. Maybe. A massive gray face takes up the window, big, black, blank eyes sitting in its oval skull as a greasy palm slams into the window. The camera falls again, and I jolt back as the TV abruptly turns off. The house is unnaturally still. No Aunt Janelle upstairs, not even the rattled pipes in the walls. My panting breath seemed like an intrusion, too loud and unnatural. I stand on shaking legs, looking around the dark room at the alien bumps of furniture, slowly turning. Nothing is out of the ordinary. The room is silent. A slow exhale leaves me, and I turn back to the TV. In the window above it, a greasy, three-fingered handprint is pressed against the glass. The TV turns back on, showing a crooked view of the empty basement as a white light outside flicks on through the window. Story 9. The helpful monster under his bed. I crouch by my child's bed for the third night, face on the blankets, weeping. Another day of begging the police for updates and getting none, of putting up posters, of spreading the word on Facebook, and still no news. The last of my hope is starting to drain from me. What kind of mother can't look after her own child? Suddenly, I hear something clear its throat. Surprised, my head jolts up, wiping the tears from my eyes. I look around until I see something that makes me scream. Some kind of baby-faced doll head is poking out from under bed and looking directly at me. I think rationally, it must just be a toy. My vision is still blurry, so I'm not seeing it right. I go to rub my eyes again, but then it speaks. About your child. It says, I need your help, acting purely on animal instinct. I stand up and run to my room. Shuffling through my nightstand, I grab my gun and stand there with my back against the wall, trying to figure out what to do. Do I hide here or go back to Andy's room? An answer is given to me as the doll head extends itself on my own bed, and I see that it's attached to some kind of stalk. There's no need to be afraid. I'm Andy's friend. I shoot, but I miss, putting a hole in my floor. The head retracts back under the bed. Okay, I see you're disturbed. Adults' minds aren't as flexible as children's, so this reaction is expected. Would you be more comfortable if I talked under here? I crouch down and try to see under the bed, starting to regain some calm. I left my phone in the other room, and the light switch is on the opposite wall. So only the dim light from the hallway illuminates. Whatever it is. All I can see is some kind of amorphous shape and the faint outline of the doll's head. Like I said, I'm Andy's friend. I was quite disturbed when he didn't come to bed 2 nights ago. Normally, I'd find him at a friend's house, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I returned here to hear you talking to the police, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Finally managing to speak, I stammer, "Were you?" That's not really important right now, but let's just say I'm a protector. Unfortunately, my influence is limited to the undersides of beds. A protector? Are you saying? You can help me find Andy? Not quite. Actually, I've already found him. I just can't get him out. I spring to my feet, ready for action. Where? Tell me where to go. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where is in terms of your world's geography. In terms of what? I can't guide you there, but I can take you there. My head is spinning. How can you do that? Well, you'll have to join me under here and allow me to envelop you. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but it sounds terrible. I don't know if I really trust this thing, but it's the only lead I've got. If you can really do that, let me get my phone. Of course. I go to the other room and grab my phone from a nightstand. As I do, I look down and see the doll head watching me once more from Andy's bed. I crouch down, aiming my phone at this creature, and go to turn the flashlight on. I wouldn't do that. It says, I think it will make your journey more distressing if you do. I'm not sure if that's really true. Wouldn't it be better to at least know what I'm working with here? I consider turning it on anyway, but decide that it doesn't really matter. When I get under that bed, it's either going to kill me or take me to Andy. Knowing what it looks like won't change that. You should hurry. I'm not sure how much longer we'll be safe. I'd recommend to close your eyes and crawl under bed and let me take it from there. I follow his instructions. At first, I lay under the bed, not feeling anything. Then a warmth starts to envelop me, but not a pleasant one. I feel like I'm being covered in fresh, raw meat. It squeezes itself all around me, even smother my face, and for a terrifying several seconds I'm unable to breathe. Then it retreats, and I find myself no longer laying on the carpet, but on hard concrete. I look around, but can't see anything. Of course, it's dark. The creature is nowhere to be seen. I turn my flashlight on, exposing a bare concrete floor. I crawl out, and my heart drops as I see Andy lying on a metallic cot. He seems unharmed, but he's tied up, blindfolded, and gagged. Andy, I whisper scream. I almost normal scream, but decide against it, not knowing that the person who did this is nearby. I get to work untying him, while trying to comfort him. Mom's here for you. Everything will be okay now. I promise. Even after ungagging him, he's silent, most likely too terrified or traumatized to speak. I hug him tight for a few seconds, and then get back into action. Finally, not focused completely on my own son, I look around the room. It's a large room, perhaps an abandoned workshop of some kind, and there are other children tied up similarly. Quickly, I take some pictures, as well as a screenshot of my location on my map app, and text them all to the police. I start to untie the next closest child, but then I hear footsteps coming from outside, getting closer to the room. I think the gun's still in my pocket, but don't want to risk anything, especially with Andy here. For all I know, it's multiple people coming, and they could all have guns too, and would probably be a better shot than I am. I crouch back down under the bed. PSSSD thing, get us out of here. No reply, not knowing what else to do. I grab Andy and pull us both under the bed. I hear the metal door screech open, and several men enter the room. The lights come on, and I hear one of them say, "Hey, one of the kids is missing." They start getting closer, and I know the cot doesn't provide much cover. I grip the gun in my hands. Luckily, I don't need to use it, as I feel the warmth start spreading itself across my back again. Apologies, the thing whispers, but provides no explanation for its tardiness. After another disgusting transport, Andy and I are back on our warm carpet. I hold him close and sob, and feel the warmth lay itself on both our shoulders, in an apparent attempt at comfort. I tuck Andy into his bed, and it's not long before the police call me, asking how I got into that building, and how I even found it in the first place. I'm unable to give them a proper answer, but I don't care right now. I'm just overwhelmed with joy to have Andy back, not getting any information from me. They let me know they'll be conducting a raid shortly, but I'll have to do a better job answering questions when a cop arrives at my door in a few minutes. Unbothered, I simply say okay, and lay in bed with my child, spending as much time here as I can until I have to go face the consequences. As I lay there with him, the doll head rises above the edge of the bed, and its smile seems wider than before. Story 10. The seminarian said he found a lost gospel. Then he vanished. The other day, I met this kid who's in seminary. He's doing his residency, or whatever they call it, at the church my wife and I attend. She wanted to get more involved, so we wound up at an event with the whole congregation. She mingled. I stood in the back. I'm quiet. That's how I came to meet the seminary kid. He approached me while I was back there alone. I think he somehow sensed I had wisdom for him, that I had been in his shoes not too long ago. I say this because we were soon talking about the Bible, then philosophy, and then dread. My 3 greatest understandings. But the more he went on, the more troubling it all became. I understood what was happening to an extent, and it was troubling. These are dangerous things to talk about, I told him, half joking. I invited him to go fishing. We can talk more about it then. That's not too uncommon around here. We live in a gray fishing town, and fishing is indeed a setting where wisdom is exchanged. It has been that way for a long time. As long as man itself, I think. I'm more of a houndsman, but I do know how to fish. Of course I do. I just don't care for the sport of it anymore. Nothing against fly fishing, but I prefer a cane pole. It's simpler. All of this sounds irrelevant, but it's exactly what I was planning on telling the seminary kid. It would all tie into the moral of the story. The cane pole will be both real and metaphorical, avoiding the complex when unnecessary. Simpler. But when fishing day came, he was grouchy. Quite clearly. I thought he might lighten up while we crafted our cane poles, but he did not. His spirit was in a quagmire of despair. We tied up the lines, got the worm soaking, and were quick to start talking again. But my planned speech broke apart fast. He really started going off. Okay, so now I'll try to explain what was going on in the kid's head, but you'll have to go with me here. You might call his ailment academic heresy. It is heresy that is birthed through research. The kid had read so thoroughly into the Bible that he started thinking it was all a lie. When people like me and him get interested in first century Christianity, we often get interested in the Christianities that didn't survive, the lost heresies. We know a few of them. The Gnostics are particularly famous. Those scholars now argue that the various groups lumped under that name were too different to be called the same thing. There's also the Marcionites, and whatever community wrote the Gospel of Thomas, the Ebionites. Anyway, from a historical perspective, heretical first and second century Christianities are deeply fascinating. But it's tragically common for young people who gain an interest in these subjects to convince themselves they've uncovered some ancient conspiracy. That one of these heresies was actually the true Christianity. They claim to back it up with textual and material evidence. That's what the seminary kid was up to. I suspected it from the beginning and had a speech planned to ease into it gently, but it failed truly. When I did finally get a chance to interrupt his antics, I tried to explain what was happening without hurting his pride. That's not always easy. I told him these heretical texts are more fun than the New Testament, but less historically accurate. There's near universal agreement, even among secular scholars, that Paul's 7 undisputed letters and the synoptic gospels are the most accurate depictions of the historical Jesus. Of course, he brought up the hexing of the true saints. And of course that was his main focus. Okay, so there are a lot of heretical texts. I already brought up the Gospel of Thomas. But the hexing of the true saints is one literally never mentioned in academic circles, but cannot seem to be fully erased from all the dark caverns of the internet. Most scholars don't even know about it, and the ones that do won't admit they do. Let me explain some of the history here. All present-day Christian churches originate from what historians call the Proto-Orthodox Church. So the Catholic Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, all forms of Protestantism, are descendants of the Proto-Orthodox Church. Now, at the time of the Proto-Orthodox Church, there were other Christian churches that did not survive. They were silenced, and the Proto-Orthodox Church's beliefs became dominant. These beliefs also happen to have the best understanding of the historical Jesus. The hexing of the true saints is some internet-born document that claims to be authentic. It's fictional. Narrated purports that the Proto-Orthodox Church, although of course that's not the name they use, crafted a hex, curse, jinx, spell with a demon, I've forgotten his name, and used it to condemn all opposing Christians to Nod, the land of confusion. The heretics, or the true saints LOL, were sent into a living state where they could never quite make sense of things and could only remember life in fragments that did not connect. They were confused until death. Those hexes could be identified by a scar on their heart, a scar formed from fire that does not burn but bewitches, or so the phony text says. I had been in the seminary kid's shoes before, and so I wanted to steer him away from this kind of thinking. It pains me that I couldn't keep things calm. We started arguing. We were throwing lines of scripture at each other, saying things like criterion of multiple independent source attestation, and what have you. I was never actually mad at him, but he got mad at me. At some point we hit a stalemate and just stood there in silence, boots in the water, holding arcane poles, sometimes swatting away gnats. Then he said, I'm gonna go take a piss, which, mind you, was strange coming from a kid training to be a priest. They're just people like you and me, Catholic priests and their students. But they don't talk like that. Point is, I could see his faith leaving him. I could see it like the last shiver of smoke from a coal match. Not just his faith, his reasoning, his common sense, his ability to not always feel like something was off, though he could never quite put his finger on what it was. He would be lost forever. Now, I think this next part was a sign from God, but I don't quite understand it. While he was pissing, his cane pole got yanked from the grass. Thankfully, it got snagged on some thicket, and I had time to stomp down on it. I started hollering that he had a fish, but he didn't answer. I asked if he wanted me to pull it in. Still nothing. He couldn't have been that far. I acted on instinct and pulled it in. It was a decent base. If it weren't on such heavy line, it might have broken it. It was a good fish, and we were catching nothing that day, and right when he goes to take a piss, he catches it. A good one. This happened a lot to fishermen. It's almost a cliche now, but this time it felt like more than happenstance. But I don't understand it. So the kid never came back. I waited, I called for him, and I looked around a little, but he was gone. Somehow I knew that he was just walking home, so I didn't panic exactly. I packed everything up, drove off, and about a mile down the road, there he was, walking home. It was awkward, but I couldn't just drive right past him, you know? So I rolled down the window and asked if he was okay. He said he was. I knew he would say that. I asked if he wanted a ride. He said no. I knew he would say that too. I offered. There was nothing more to do. I told myself maybe the long walk would help him. Maybe it would give him time to reflect on what I'd said, because I had warned him. He could not say that he wasn't warned. But now there was this other awkward part. I went to confession and told our parish priest about the incident. It's uncomfortable bringing your priest into your personal drama, especially when the two of you are close, and especially if the person in question is a seminarian doing his residency, or whatever they call it, at his church. But I had to tell him. It sounds like tattletaling, but it was not. This was a serious matter, and I had seen the consequences. I wanted to help the kid, but then the priest stopped me halfway through my explanation, saying, "Wait, sorry, who are you referring to?" That kid in seminary. Which kid in seminary? The one who was here helping out. When? These past few weeks. What did he look like? Well, I said, I can't really remember. The priest sighed. I said, I met him at that event. Lots of people were there. My wife met him. He said, Michael, we haven't hosted a seminarian in years. I chuckled a little. You don't have a wife. You've never had a wife. I couldn't seem to respond. He said, I hope it isn't you, Michael, who is having these ideas again. A metaphor for yourself. Because as we have warned you, they come with serious consequences. He reminded me of how tempting it can be for a young man to get interested in historical Jesus. He starts reading about the Q source, Paul's 7 undisputed letters, the criterion of dissimilarity. Then he finds some heretical text, something called the hexing of the true saints, or whatever dramatic title its author gave it, that they can't quite get rid of for some fucking reason. It always slithers its way back. And when that creeping young man finds a hexing of the true saints, he might start thinking there is some truth to its nonsense. He might start talking about it. And we can't have that, right, Michael? I still couldn't really speak. Touch the scar on your chest. It is from a burn. It was placed there by fire that is immaterial. It is shaped like something. I think it has been there for a long time.